My name is Angela Meriquez Vázquez, and today I'm here to speak as a disabled former athlete, long COVID patient, and president of Body Politic. As you heard, the grassroots patient-led organization at the forefront of long COVID advocacy, fueled by our support group of over 10,000 patients worldwide. Many of you know my story, but in case you don't, I'll briefly introduce myself. Before getting COVID-19 here in Los Angeles in March 2020, I was a runner for nearly 2 decades. In fact, the morning of the day I first started feeling sick, I had gone for a great 3-mile run. In a process that mirrors many of yours, what started as a mild illness progressed over weeks to months with an increasingly scary set of symptoms, including severe levels of blood clots, a series of mini strokes, brain swelling, seizures, painful heart palpitations, severe shortness of breath, extreme confusion and numbness in my face, hands, and legs that progressed to an inability to walk for several days, and new onset of anaphylaxis after every meal. I've since been diagnosed with many of the big hitters: mast cell activation syndrome, hyperPOTS, and hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I still struggle with post-exertional symptom exacerbation, though my malaise is much more of the wired but tired flavor of PEM. Insomnia, muscle spasms and cramps, trouble thinking and executive function, migraines, and body-wide pain. My nervous system was severely impacted by both the virus and the medical neglect and gaslighting I experienced in the first year of my illness. My threshold for emotional exertion is much lower than even my thresholds for physical and cognitive exertion. I imagine many of you can relate from your early days of illness and the grief and trauma you still carry with you. I credit my ability to continue working full-time on children's health, volunteer almost full-time as Body Politic's president, and protecting voting rights on the California Redistricting Commission to 2 things. Firstly, the community. Our community, you. Joining Body Politic in its early days connected me with the only group of people at that time who could have understood exactly what I was going through minute by minute with this virus. They got me through the nights alone in bed, feeling like my brain had forgotten how to breathe, experiencing what I now know to be seizures from my bed after being discharged as a psych patient from more than one emergency room. But in many ways, it was the blind leading the blind in those early days. That's why I'm eternally grateful for someone in my life at this time who had lived with infection-triggered chronic illness for longer than any of us with long COVID. She is a former acquaintance and now good friend with chronic Lyme. Her advocacy on Instagram about her POTS and her MCAS made me pretty certain within a few weeks of my symptoms that I had POTS. And of course, as soon as the anaphylaxis started, I knew without a doubt I also had MCAS. I became laser focused on getting on those endless waiting lists for the small handful of specialists in Los Angeles who treat those conditions. I started managing my symptoms with pacing, electrolytes, and upping my antihistamines. I was barely functional, but I'm certain because I had a leg up on buffering some of the long-term damage that these illnesses perpetuate without treatment or support, I am as functional and responsive to additional specialized treatments as I am today. But many in our community flounder with these medically unexplained symptoms for years and even decades, as you well know. My friend now has severe ME after 2 COVID infections on top of her chronic Lyme disease. I'm in this work for both of our sakes. So that leads me to the second thing that kept me afloat, and that was the competent medical care I eventually got. When I eventually connected with the right team of specialists, my life opened up immensely. I am not cured by any stretch, and I feel a grave sense of body vulnerability in the world, especially as the virus continues to evolve and our government pulls back on the barest of minimum investments in public health protections. But I am not where I was because I have access to knowledgeable, quality, competent expert care. I'm a Latina in a state that just granted Medicaid eligibility for undocumented immigrants. I think daily about our essential workers across the nation who are largely Black and Brown people with families and children who already live life on the edge of poverty and vulnerability to chronic health conditions as a result of systemic racism and social drivers of health like poor housing or lack of universal health care. How many immigrants, how many Black and Brown people are suffering from long COVID, from ME, MCAS, POTS, pushing and crashing themselves into disability without any pathway to diagnosis, much less treatment. We know that our Latinx, Black, and Native communities bore the brunt of the virus and the economic impacts of the pandemic. We simply must insist that our federal government pull out all the stops to ensure our most marginalized communities have access to not just specialty care, but primary care physicians who can properly screen for and support symptom management of these conditions, while we continue to demand public investment and research into treatment for ME and other conditions. Thank you to this community for embracing me, for embracing long COVID patients. We are stronger together, and I look forward to more moments of solidarity and speaking truth to power as we seek justice for ourselves and for our community members who are too sick or too marginalized to be here with us. Thank you.